Hey everybody, Tim here with today's review of Doctor Who: An Adventure in Time and Space, the movie. So this was a great movie. I really wanted to watch this after I finished my first run with the Doctor, and it's perfect. It's such a good movie that I'm a little bit upset at like the BBC or whoever. I don't know who I'm upset with, but I'm upset with them because we haven't gotten more of these movies. Like, I want to see a movie for every Doctor, for the behind the scenes of Patrick Troughton and Pertwee and Davison and Baker and everybody. Like, I want to see these behind the scene movies, watching them develop through the characters, through the storytelling, through the productions. And I think this movie did a great job. So this movie came out in 2013, so it's a little bit ago. Like, it's kind of old at this point. And David Bradley plays William Hartnell in this movie, which is great. So a little bit of a spoiler, in 2017, which is like 5 years later, David Bradley kind of almost redoes the role of William Hartnell as the first Doctor in the crossover special, Twice Upon a Christmas. And so I think that's great that he plays William Hartnell in this movie, and he plays the first Doctor in that crossover special. And I would be super excited to see him again in any sort of role in Doctor Who, which this isn't the first time he's been in Doctor Who. He's been in it before in the Dinosaurs on a Spaceship episode, and he was in the Sarah Jane Adventures. He's a great actor, and like in anything he does, like whether it's Harry Potter, whether it's Game of Thrones, he's a great actor in general. It's interesting to note that, so we know William Hartnell had a lot of issues in Doctor Who, which is why they ended up recasting the role. He was like 55 when he was first cast as the Doctor, which is kind of weird because you watch the series and you're like, really? He was only 55? Whereas in this movie, David Bradley's like 71 when he's playing William Hartnell. So he's like what, 12 years older than the actual actor was. So it's kind of interesting to watch that. So the movie actually starts at the end. It's one of those where it starts at the end and it goes back to the beginning. There's a term for that, and I don't remember the actual term for it. But it's kind of fun to watch it, like 1966, and they're filming the last episode with the introduction of the Cybermen, and they're just sitting around the set smoking, so it's kind of funny. And then we go back in time to 1963 when the series actually starts. And it's kind of nice because we see Brian Cox, one of my favorite actors, super awesome, who plays Sydney, and he pulls in and he gets yelled at by the parking attendant, like, I have to see your pass. And he's like, I'm Sydney, like, what do you expect? And he goes into the building, which, by the way, that parking attendant was played by William Russell, the guy that plays Chesterton, the original first companion. So that was awesome. I loved seeing him in that. And again, I would love to see Chesterton come back for some sort of walk-on role. Like, I've said it over and over again, especially with like the 13th Doctor right now with Jodie. Like, I would love to see her see Chesterton, and I would love to see her see Susan, just like, especially Susan, to be like grandmother. Like, I think it would be great. So anyways, the movie really starts out with Verdi and Sydney basically talking about making a new TV show, because Sydney is recently promoted and he needs a new show, and so he gets Verdi to basically become the producer. So he promotes her to lead producer of this brand new show that's mostly aimed for kids, and it's supposed to be like an info show, like an educational type show. So they go back in time and they learn about all sorts of stuff. We also meet Waris Hessen, the director, who has a very difficult time because he's Indian, and it's unclear, but it's implied that he's gay, which he was later on. So, or in real life he was. So, and that kind of is important later on. So, because that's why this Doctor Who was so groundbreaking. It had a female producer that nobody thought could do the job, and the first director was actually this gay Indian. So I thought that was great, and it shows like what these minorities can do, and they made Doctor Who what it is. So I think that's amazing. It's super something to be proud of. So at first, Sidney does not like it. He absolutely hates it. He doesn't like the opening credits. He doesn't like how the Doctor specifically mentions what year they come from, and he thinks the Doctor is mean, and he wants to like redo all of the personalities. So he's like, refilm the whole pilot. So they have to go back and they have to refilm it, which in the meantime, they are writing other stories. So we hear about how Terry Nation is writing a story about the Daleks, and Sidney's like, no robots. But she's like, trust me, they're not. They'll be fine. You'll love it. They also mentioned the Marco Polo story, which was a huge story for its time. So finally, they air the first episode, and then Kennedy is shot and killed here in America. And nobody watches Doctor Who because everybody's watching the news. And so we kind of start learning more about it, where the ratings were just in the toilet. Nobody watched the show. And so Verdi basically goes to Sidney, and Sidney's like, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to pull the plug. We're going to have to kill Doctor Who. And she's like, no, we're going to keep doing it because it's going to be great. And finally Sidney's like, okay, you get one more chance. And Verdi's like, thank you. And re-air the pilot so people will actually watch it. So sure enough, they re-air the pilot. They do the whole first caveman story, Unearthly Child. And then they do the Dalek story, and it gets like 10 million viewers, which is great. It's like everybody's talking about it. There's a great scene with Verdi on the bus, and kids are running down the bus yelling, exterminate, exterminate. And the show's a hit, like from the very beginning. It's a great show. Fast forward a year, and we start to see William Hartnell, Bill, struggling with the words. And especially, there's some great scenes with like Reign of Terror, where we see the outfits in the Web Planet, where he's trying to say like light years and Earth and stuff like this, but he's having a lot of difficulty with the dialogue. And it's those early struggles that William Hartnell had. Finally, we see Susan decide to depart the show because she's tired of just being like a scream queen, and she actually wants to do an actual show. It is one of the best episodes ever. It's the Dalek invasion of Earth, and it's so good. And William Hartnell actually kind of steals the spotlight from Susan leaving when he gives his final speech about like no regrets, nothing like that. And it's a fantastic episode. And we do see Susan 2 more times after that. We still need Susan today. Like, get Carol Ann Ford on the show. Now is the perfect time. I'm not going to stop harping on that until we finally see her again. So eventually we see Verdi say goodbye from producer. She steps down, and at her party we actually do see Carol Ann Ford have a small cameo in the party. We also see the actress that played Polly in there as well. They're kind of standing next to each other, and it's great to kind of see them together. There's some really great like set photos where it started early on, where it's like the Doctor and Susan, Barbara and Ian like doing set photos of like, oh, here's our first scene together. We see a set photo of him, Dodo, and Steven together, and then finally we do see the Doctor, Ben, and Polly together in like the final season. And then finally Sidney has to come up with the decision that, you know what, we can't have Doctor Who without Doctor Who. And so he comes up with the idea of let's recast him. We got to regenerate him. We got to do something. And they have that difficult conversation with Bill, and he's like, I'm sorry, but the show has to revamp. And Bill's like, yes, let's do it. And Sidney's like, you're not getting it. We need to redo the show. We need to revamp it and make it interesting, but without you. And then you actually kind of see William Hartnell kind of break down. And then there's the scene where he's at home and he breaks down, he's crying, and he's like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Because it had just blown up. Like, we see him with kids and we see how popular he is. And that's kind of a shout out to when David Tennant left. But it was a great scene. And it's really sad to watch William Hartnell kind of get forced out of the show. We do see him meet like the Patrick Troughton character, who I actually didn't like. Like, I felt like David Bradley was perfect casting, whereas the actor who plays Patrick Troughton, I feel like they didn't do as well, because they knew he was only going to be on screen for like 10 seconds, but they could have done better, especially if they were ever going to do like an Adventure in Time and Space Part 2. Eventually, like, as he's doing his final scenes, Matt Smith makes a cameo as the 11th Doctor. I hated that. Like, did not need it. I understand this movie came out in 2013, and they were doing, like, the 50-year anniversary and stuff like that. did not need to see Matt Smith in there. Like, it instantly took me out of this movie. Whereas if they had just continued, I would have been just fine. So overall, though, I would say other than that last final scene, it was a great movie, really, really well done, and I would love to see a second one about Patrick Troughton, and a third one about Pertwee, and a fourth one about Tom Baker, etc., etc. And I think it could be really, really well done. So for those who have seen this movie, I'm curious, what did you guys think about it? Would you guys want to see more movies? Go ahead, let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys for everything, and hopefully I will see you guys next time for An Adventure in Time and Space 2.